this time, feel free. I've got my cup of hot chocolate in Jane Austen. I'm actually not a fan of tea, but it still beats morning tea with a hot chocolate or a coffee if you're a true Melburnian. And I've also got my 2 cakes to keep me occupied. So if you've got any goodies, feel free to break them out while we're listening during this time. So yeah, I'll pass it on to Janet now.
Hi everyone. I want to welcome you. It's really great to have you here. I just thought I'd tell you about how we started. About 4 years ago, I suggested to the Blossom team of the women's ministry that we try running a biggest morning tea for cancer research. 20 years ago, my sister-in-law died in her late 40s, leaving 3 young children. And ever since then, wherever I've been, I've tried to run a biggest morning tea in memory of her. And as well as raising money, which is really good in itself, I thought it was an opportunity for us to learn from and be challenged by women who knew more about the experience of cancer than many of us do. And so every time we've been able to be blessed by someone being interviewed. So at Crossculture, we've interviewed some women every single year, and yeah, it's been really fantastic. So the beginning of August, I have to have major surgery myself in Peter Mac to remove a thankfully benign but locally aggressive tumour in my nasosinus area, and because of that I'll be off the air for 12 months recovering. So I'm pulling back from formally being involved in Women of Grace and the events at the moment. So thankfully Natalie's been moving in to take over the ministry, and I just really welcome all her gifts of organisation and commitment and love that she's bringing to the women in Crossculture. So here's Natalie.
Thanks so much, Janet. And on behalf of all the women at Crossculture, we just wanted to say a big thank you for all the love and care that you've shown to us over the years. You're such a wonderful friend and mentor to so many of us at church. Always so quick to show kindness and carry the burdens of others, and provide a timely word of encouragement to those in need. So know that we'll be praying for your surgery in August and for your recovery. We'll really miss you while you're away, but we hope to see you back soon.
Thanks, Nat.
All right. So, yeah, once again, welcome everybody to Australia's biggest morning team, hosted virtually by Blossom. I just thought I'd speak a bit about, as Janet said, this is a fundraising event which lots of people hold usually in May, but you can do it any time of year. We're doing a bit later due to everything that's happened this year. So we will show eventually a donations slide, which will come up multiple times and will be left at the end, this one. So we've got a QR code. If you know how to use that, you're welcome to snapshot the QR code, which will take you to a page where you can donate. Otherwise, we've got the link down below if you need that as well. A bit easier to get to sometimes if you can't use the QR. And all the donations for this go to the Victorian Cancer Council for Research for Cancer. So yeah, like Janet said, cancer is quite widespread, and I'm sure a lot of us have been affected, whether that's in small ways or big ways in close family or friends. And it's quite impactful when it happens. So yeah, it just does take a lot of work through research and through things like the Peter Mac hospital to help care for those going through cancer and those around them as well. So yeah, the Cancer Council has done an amazing job and organising Australia's biggest morning tea, which is a great fundraiser for all the research that they do to help impact those who have been diagnosed with cancer and their friends and family around them. Also, just to note, all donations above $2 are tax deductible as well. So when you receive a receipt, you can keep that. Beautiful. So we're going to head into our first interview today. So I'll hand over to Pixie, who's going to introduce Gail.
Thank you, Gabby. I almost forgot to unmute myself. May I, at this point now, welcome Gail Di Lorenzo. Gail is a midwife and a nurse, of course. She is also the wife of our pastor, our family pastor at the church, Pastor Lou Di Lorenzo. And she also leads our ladies' church. Gail is also mother to 4. And she makes the most scrumptious cakes and biscuits and pastries that she's been sharing around with all of us. And it's such a shame we can't have that biggest morning tea where we can actually sample her wares, because they are wonderful. So without any more delay, I'm going to introduce Gail, as I said. And Gail.
Hi, Pixie.
I just wanted to make sure we could all hear you. Welcome, Gail.
Thank you. Thank you.
Gail, can I start with my first question? My first question is, when was Dad sick and what kind of cancer did he have? And could I just throw in one more? How old were you and your siblings at this time?
Yeah. So Dad was diagnosed with lymphoma in February 1977 after feeling unwell over the Christmas New Year period. He developed tumours in his lungs and on his brain, and he died with lymphoma on May 25th, 1977, 3 months later after being diagnosed. My dad was 46, Mum was 40, and there was 7 children, 19 down to 9. I was the second oldest in the family, but not the oldest daughter, so I was 17.
Thank you. Could you also tell us, this was a very difficult time, so how did Dad respond?
Yeah, Dad was very positive. He never showed a downside. He was always strong for us, and he believed the doctors would heal him. 9 years prior to him having the cancer, he'd been in a really bad car accident and lost his arm. And despite that, he travelled around country Victoria for work, and he built extensions on our home, he painted our home, he built swings and slides for the local school. He was always making something, so cancer wasn't going to beat him. He joked with us, he later on one night or one morning he fell asleep in the chair, and after twitching and he collapsed in the chair, and we thought he died, and we ran over crying, and he just joked when he woke up, and he said, "Oh, it's all right, kids, I'll give you a wink when I kick the bucket." So he was just always very jokey and light-hearted about it, but deep down I think he was concerned. As he went for treatment in Peter McCallum, because we lived in Ballarat, Mum and Dad would stay down in Melbourne, and Dad was in Peter Mac, and Mum stayed with my cousin, whose husband was had been a pastor, and the cousins spent a lot of time with Mum and Dad, supporting them and praying with Dad.
Thank you. He sounds like he was so much fun. So may I ask, what was the impact on you emotionally and spiritually? Could you enlarge on that a little bit?
Yeah, emotionally, I was angry at God. I was scared for Dad. I thought he might go to hell, because Mum was very strong in her faith and believed in God and was very open about it. And I knew that if she died, she'd go to heaven. But Dad didn't go to church. He believed in God, but yeah, he just was very quiet about it. Yeah, so I didn't know about that. I was quite scared for him. And Dad was the upfront guy. He could do anything. He could do anything he put his hand to. He was dependable. Yeah, now my invincible dad was fading before my eyes. And when he died, it was having like having my heart ripped out from me or losing a limb. And at his funeral, I saw the difference between the Christian emphasis on life and hope after you die, as opposed to at the graveside, the Freemasons performed a ritual, and it was quite empty and not much hope there. And yeah, I just saw the difference in that, and I really struggled with that after the funeral. Where would I go when I died? Would I see Dad again? Anyway, I thought if I go to heaven, God would know my motives for wanting to commit my life to God. Anyway, I struggled through that and prayed with Mum, and finally I asked God into my heart and to be my heavenly Father and my earthly father as well. So yeah, so that's how I emotionally.
Oh, that is powerful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gail. May I ask, how did your family get support during this difficult time? Where did you personally look for support?
Family-wise, there was family. The two younger children were billeted out to my aunties, and the neighbour took my third youngest sister. Neighbours and friends from church would bring us food or invite us for meals. They helped with the washing with Mum. They visited Mum and Dad in hospital. My brothers received support from the footy coach and their bosses at work. Some men in the church came alongside my brother. My form teacher and basketball coach would ask how I was going. Dad's mates from the pub took up a financial collection to help support Mum. Yeah. Personally, where did I look for support? I was the oldest daughter, of course. Being the oldest daughter, I was just focused on running the family and keeping the house going and the kids going to all their activities. I also was doing year 12, so I was in autopilot for my studies for year 12, or form 6 it was then. We just continued our school activities, out of school activities, going to them, doing work part-time. Yeah, I do running and squash. I used to transport my younger sister to school, high school, so we'd talk on our way to school and back. My other sister, we shared the room with, so we'd talk at night, way into the night. A long-time school friend from prep, I used to share with her. And then one of the other girls I was doing year 12 with, she had lost her mum the year before with cancer, so she knew what I was going through too. So yeah, my brother and his girlfriends, that we all sort of supported each other.
Okay, that sense of community and friendship is very beautiful. Yeah. Could you share with us, please, some of the things that were helpful or some of the things that were unhelpful that people would say to you and your family at this time?
Yeah, well, like I shared, all those things were helpful. People and friends, community coming alongside us and supporting us practically, as well as, just phone calls, visiting, cups of tea. Unhelpful things was my two younger sisters were only 9 and 10 and a half, and Mum felt they were too young to understand about cancer, but they were taken to my auntie in Geelong, and they went to school there, and they were introduced, and the teacher introduced them and said, their dad had cancer, and she started asking them questions about it. Well, they were just freaked out and so overwhelmed, and at lunchtime started running away and thought, where do we know? We don't know anywhere in Geelong, and ran back to my auntie's house. Well, she just took them under her wing and just, faced this problem head on, and she took them back to Peter Mac in Melbourne and shared with them on the way about cancer, and brought them to Dad to explain everything to them. So I think that, to me, looking back, it was unhelpful that Mum hadn't explained that to the two young ones and just assumed they didn't understand. Another unhelpful thing was mostly everybody was very supportive, and this lovely lady thought she was, and she just wrapped her arms around Mum. You poor thing, you Shirley, you've got 7 children, they're all so young, you poor thing, how are you going to cope? Well, after she left, Mum just felt so dragged down and so low, and yeah, I could see that didn't help her at all. And another thing was, on the day of the funeral, we, had the opportunity to go and see Dad for a viewing before the funeral, and one of Mum's friends was so indignant. No way, you don't let your children go. You don't go there, kids. That'll be so bad for you. Anyway, we retaliated against her, and we actually went. The 5 older kids went, but their 2 younger siblings didn't, my 2 sisters, and to this day they resent that they didn't see Dad, and that has impacted in their lives as well when they've faced death.
Oh, thank you,
Yeah.
Gail. Always a bit scary when you don't know what to say. Thank you for sharing that. Could I also ask, what would you say you learned most from this time, and how did you grow in your relationship with Jesus?
Okay, yeah, well, I learned I appreciate life and don't take it for granted. That's one thing. I learned that each person, brothers, sisters, my mum, everyone grieves differently. You can handle it so far. Mum held herself together for 6 months and then she collapsed in a heap. I mean, the attitudes in those days where you just got on with life. Today, there's a lot more support for people going through grief and loss. And yeah, I realised the impact and the ripple effect a loss of person has on in the not just within the family, but within your friendship groups, your colleagues, your community, neighbours. Yeah. What the other thing is, I'd become a Christian, so I changed my perspective of people. Like, before that I was very critical of people, not trusting. Yeah, but now I'm very insular, and after I became a Christian, I was a lot more open, saw people in a different light, saw them as people that God's created and loves each one of them. And yeah, that was just a new acceptance of people within school, my family, the church, and yeah, work colleagues. Yeah, and growing in my relationship with God. Yeah, now I had a Heavenly Father to talk to. I really miss Dad, but yeah, I had God who was there with me to talk to, even on earth as well as heaven. Things that changed, I went to church now because I wanted to go, not because I had to go. Mum used to cart us there 3 times a day under sufferance, but now I went with a renewed relationship and wanting to know more, and joined a Bible study group. I also was mentored by an older girl from the church who, grounded me in Christian values and the Christian walk through Navigators. Yeah, so I just believe it's made me a lot more sensitive to people who are suffering, whether it be an illness or loss of life or loved one. And I guess that's why I've done nursing and midwifery. And over the years, the circumstances and things that I've gone through, situations I've gone through, God's been my strength, and that He gave me the confidence to leave Ballarat. I'm sure I wouldn't have left there if I hadn't had this confidence. And yeah, I grew in myself as a person, and yeah, since then I've just relied on God to help me through difficult times, and yeah, never looked back.
Thank you so much, Gail. Now, I know from the practice session we had, there is so much more that you can share with us. It is very, very powerful. So guys, we'll have to wait until we go into the breakout room for more. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Gail. Back to you, Gabby.
Thanks, Pixie.
Lovely. Thanks, Pixie and Gail, or my mum, if no one has seen that we've got the same last name. Nice to hear that. Now we're actually going to go on to our next interview. So I'm going to pass it on to Marcy, who's going to introduce and interview Ruth.
Hi, everyone. I'm Marcy. Today we have the pleasure of having Ruth. Ruth, thank you again for your time and your willingness to share your experience as a healthcare provider, as well as someone who's dealt with cancer personally, especially after such a long shift at work. Now, Ruth is a highly trained intensive care unit nurse, dealing with both of patients who may or may not be affected with cancer. Even more so, Ruth has personally been affected by cancer, and she has had it diagnosed just a few years back. So let's dive right into it. Ruth, if you don't mind sharing, when were you first diagnosed with cancer?
Oh, hi. Thank you for having me, first of all. I'm usually a camera shy person, and I just had a shift last night, as what you mentioned. So please bear with me. There's nothing wrong with your devices or your computer. It's just my brain, still buffering. So yeah, just please bear with me. I was diagnosed with an endometrial stage 1 cancer. It simply means there's a mandarin size mass sitting at the top of my uterus. So yeah, so they need to get rid of that, including my uterus. So yeah, my uterus is gone, as well as the mass.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, and I guess with any sort of diagnosis, it's quite scary and quite confronting, I'm sure. How did you respond to that initial diagnosis? How did it challenge you physically or emotionally or even spiritually?
Backtrack 2015, I had a lump in my breast, both breasts. So I did the scan and the mammogram, and it turned out benign, thankfully. So when I had these symptoms, I pretty much anticipated that I'm going through that drill again. So it's not common as well for my age to experience those symptoms. But when they rang earlier than I expected, I knew I'm in trouble. I know it's bad news. So physically, it's full on. There's rounds of tests, scans, consultation to 3 medical teams. Every time I had appointment with them, there's just too much information and difficult to absorb. So yeah, it was full on. And then emotionally, of course, on top of the list is you're in denial. You want to make sure that they didn't commit any mistake and it's conclusive. Otherwise, I would ask for another round of tests, but it's conclusive, so we can't do anything about that. There is, of course, fear. When if they open my stomach, will there be any more cancer cells in there? Will I get chemotherapy, radiotherapy, all sorts of those things? Will I be able to wake up post anesthesia? That's when being a nurse kicks in, because we nurses we always think of the worst case scenario. If Gail would agree, spiritually, in the midst of intense pressure and uncertainty, you can only find peace and will to keep going by praying and trusting in His word. Praying, to be honest, I struggled really. I'm sure those who had experienced this, initially they would experience struggle to pray. So I had two of my friends and a relative to constantly pray for me as a backup. Yeah, and yeah, that's it.
Thank you for sharing so vulnerably about how it really affects you in all aspects of life, because it clearly doesn't just affect, you know, one portion in one aspect, but it kind of hits you in all directions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you again for sharing so intimately about your struggle, especially in your spiritual life, about that. I guess during that time, how did you get the support that you needed? Because it sounded like there was a lot of physical and emotional and as well as, you know, spiritual drainage out of you. So what did you find was most helpful for you during this time in terms of getting the support that you needed?
I live on my own here. So I asked my sister to come here and support me. Work-wise, my nurse manager was very helpful supporting me. And they asked me to take my time, you know, to recover and don't think about anything about work. Actually, to be honest, it took me a week or so to come out from my friends and my second family in church, because I have to make sure that I'm emotionally prepared and that, you know, medical speaking, I need to sort out all those things first before, you know, I come out and tell them these things. I still need to process all those things. Talking and explaining to everyone, it drains me and somewhat exhausts me. So I'm never comfortable with attention. Otherwise, I'll be an emotional wreck. So, but that saying, I'm very grateful to those who reach out, to those who prayed and randomly text me, the well-wishers, those who visited me in the hospital, those people who respected my space. Yeah, it's been greatly appreciated and very helpful. Everything's helpful, honestly. No one's been, you know, I greatly appreciate them all. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you. I'm sure, you know, each time you go to share your experience again, it sort of, in a sense, reopens those experiences and in a sense, reopens sometimes the wounds that you might have. So again, thank you for sharing all of that. It's, I guess, in a way, a really great testimony that you can now share and how you've grown. And it shows us how much you've grown through these things that you've been through, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what have you learned from this time? How did your relationship with Jesus grow?
Well, I will always have a soft spot with those people who's been suffering from cancer or in any form of illnesses. I identified with them, including my patient. I am impatient sometimes with my patient, but I will never look at them the same way again. And that includes painkiller, you know. I thank God for the people who invented painkillers, really. But on a serious note, I have learned that suffering is, we're not exempted from suffering, that this is our way of walking with God, obeying Him. As what He said in Matthew 16:24, if you want to come follow me, take up your cross and follow Him. If you want to follow Him, yeah. So I during those times, I never asked God why. It never occurred to me that, you know, why me? Otherwise, He might answer, why not? So I just pray God that, you know, He will give me the strength to handle it on a daily basis. it also reminded me of Job. You know, in just one day, his livelihood, his children were taken away from him in just one day. He didn't say anything, and he just fall to the ground and praised him. I may be very far from what Job has experienced or what Job did, but I never asked why God, why me? And I'm just thankful that, you know, I was able to experience that, and I was able to glorify God through that suffering. Also in Job 23, I quote that He knows the way that I take when He has tried glory and for us. There's always an expectation and hope that when you pray, you will be healed. But we should also believe in the sovereign will of God, that His will be done, that His name will be glorified through our body to conform to His image. Cancer might be back. I still have issue with my lump in my breast, but I am assured that God will be there supporting me and supporting me. God will go through with me, and as long as, you know, God would be glorified in my body through suffering, without fear, but instead with faith, I can take that. I want to quote Charles Spurgeon when he said that, "I'm certain that I never did grow in grace one half so much anywhere as I have upon the bed of pain." So that's very comforting and encouraging to me to look forward and not be fearful, but to hold on to His faith, to His promise.
Wow, thank you. It's really encouraging to be able to hear your story and have an understanding of someone who's both a healthcare provider and also someone afflicted or was afflicted by cancer, and their journey and how you've grown from that. So again, thank you for sharing all of that.
Sure.
Yeah,
I hope they understood
yeah.
what I'm saying.
I think it's safe to say that for most of us, we've been really blessed by your testimony and your sharing in this way.
Yeah. My brain is still buffering, so yeah. Thank you.
That's
for
all
listening.
good. Go have a cup of tea now.
I will.
Thanks, Ruth.
You're welcome, Marcy.
We'll pass it back on to Gabby.
Oh, thanks, Marcy, and thanks so much, Ruth. Lovely to hear from you. And like Marcy said, a healthcare provider and someone who has gone through cancer as well. Our last panelist and interview will be with Jackie, whom I am going to interview. So Jackie, welcome to the Zoom stage. So Jackie is a radiation oncologist, and she's completed her training in Brisbane and her specialty area training in radiation oncology. As written there, she's done her MBBS in the Uni of Queensland, and then she's come down to Melbourne to join all us coffee and cultured goers, and she still does a little bit of research, but also working at Peter Mac mostly, which is our lovely Victorian cancer comprehensive cancer centre, BCCC. I've got some of the words correct in there somewhere. And she's also just said for more information about cancer and that sort of thing, she's got a website, targetingcancer.com.au, if you guys want to learn anything more. So Jackie, I'll just make sure you're there.
Yes.
I might just, okay, cool. Sorry, I just can't see you at the moment.
I'm here.
You're there? Okay, beautiful, I can see you now. Wonderful. Did you want to say anything else for your introduction as well?
Not really. No, I just yeah, I came down here to do for a research job, and then I've just kind of stayed, hung around.
I'm glad you liked us enough to stay down here. I also love your graph. Sorry, I just will point it out. When I first saw it, I didn't quite understand, but for those who didn't, the graph that is here just now, so relative importance in 2020 so far. So just cut off, it's January, February, March. So as we're going into isolation, coffee, of course, for the Melburnian is right up there. And then as we get into February and then March, love the toilet paper spike. That took me from nowhere. I was without toilet paper and have never been so sparse of use for it when I couldn't buy it. But it's okay, I survived. Hopefully we'll survive 2.0 as well. And the sweatpants, of course, going up, and alcohol and shaving going down. That definitely went down for me as well. Don't think I shaved during lockdown. No point. But I love it. It's a good, amusing representation of what our experience has been, and maybe lockdown 2.0. But Jackie, thank you so much for speaking as our last panelist and interviewee. I'll just start off the questions. So my first question for you as a radiation oncologist, how do cancer patients and their families respond to the crisis time?
Well, I think Ruth and Gail actually kind of explained all these things, and they had pretty much, they said all the things that I wanted to say, because it's obviously a variety of ways, everyone's different. Insight, and they can be, and from me, what I see is people going through having denial, being fatalistic, preparing for battle, being practical and getting on with it, but also often there's a lot of emotion, so anxiety, fear, anger, and later on in the stage, depression is quite common. So that's what I have to remember when I first see someone with a new diagnosis, or even a recurrence, or some change in circumstance, that there's a lot of anxiety and fear, and so it's hard for people to remember and take in what I need, what I feel I need to say to them, or what helpful advice or information I can give them. I need to remember that they might not take in very much the first time. So it's really just asking, I ask people what they understand, and try and see where they are emotionally as well, and tailor the upcoming plan, what you say to them where they are at the time, and just say that I'm really happy to go over everything again at another consultation, because I know that you might not take in too much the first time. And also some people have some really pressing concerns that are really unexpected, so it's good to ask people. So they might actually be more worried about their job, that they've got some project, or their kids, or being with them for school holidays, than the plan for their cancer treatment. So something else might be what they're focusing on. So it's good to just ask any particular things that they're worried about as well. So yeah, it's just kind of just being understanding and gracious, and just kind of just to try and help them where they are at that time, and build rapport, because you want to be with them for the the long term. That's it.
Yeah. I love hearing that answer, particularly as a nurse, ED nurse myself. I know I see doctors go into the room, talk to my patients, come out, and I walk in, and you just realize the patient's taken anything. So, or because they're being spoken at, and the doctor walks out, and ED doctors we're very good in ED about being practical, getting things done fast. But it's nice to hear that you got to take your time with patients, because it would be hard to take everything in at that time, as you said. What are the challenges you treat and talk to cancer patients as a radiation oncologist?
Okay, so there's so many things, but there's some the things I've thought about in particular are that there's a lot of complex decision making. There's so many different options for what treatments people can have, and they're often tailored for where the patient's at, what the patient wants, and their priorities, what patients are up to tolerating or not tolerating. So, and a lot of unknowns in terms of the best way to treat some cancers. So a lot of the cancers I treated are very straightforward. There's very strong guidelines and evidence. But then, particularly at Peter Mac, we have a lot of, I guess it's a tertiary hospital, and there's always cases that are complex that you've never seen before, and that lots of heads need to get together to decide what the best thing is. So it's kind of just been wanting to be able to make the best decision for the patient when there's no definite right or wrong answers. So there's a lot of time, a lot of hours spent behind the scenes that patients often don't know about of us, of trying to, to work out the best plan of attack. The other thing was just seeing the suffering of patients and their families that I'm often unable to help with. So I can do a lot of things to relieve suffering through what I can say to explain things, as well as treatments and things. But obviously there's a lot of stuff, the suffering that you see that you can't help. And yeah, it's hard to see people go through that. And I don't know, it's also harder if sometimes the patient is their own worst enemy, in that they don't take advice because of false beliefs, or they have some denial or some thing going on, and that they actually cause more suffering for themselves by delaying or denying or having alternative treatment, when you can see that that's, I have to understand that's obviously a response and to anxiety, fear, trying to do what they can to control things. But it's hard. I guess that's why it's good to try and, when you first meet someone, to start off, see where they're at, so you can kind of meet them there and help them kind of get through the maze of things, and with good advice. So yeah, just seeing suffering, I think, that definitely does affect me emotionally and spiritually. So, I mean, we see, like, most of my patients have cancer or whatever. So, but it's still, and you do get used to that, but it's still pretty common that you have particular cases that are quite sad, make you feel quite sad, teary, and some heartache too, when you see, especially people who are at the end of their life. So even whether people are young or old or whatever, death always feels wrong, and it's not how it should be. And every time I have, not very often, but when someone dies, it kind of feels like there's something really precious that's been lost from the world each time. So if I know that person had trusted Jesus as their Saviour and Lord, I can be thankful that I know that they had peace with God, and to know that they had hope, even, through their treatment or in palliation, they had hope in God and peace with God and hope for a life in heaven. And it isn't very often, but it is nice to share that hope with patients or their family. It's in the midst of the sadness, But it's also hard because it's not appropriate, or I can't share that hope that I have, and that with some of my patients, that they don't know that hope, and they're kind of trying to deal with the confusion of cancer and treatment and injustice by themselves. Yeah, so without that comfort from God.
Awesome. So I think, that was sort of my next question, but you kind of answered, how caring for people affect you emotionally and spiritually. But also, where do you look for then and get support and strength for yourself?
I think work colleagues, like where I work, is where I have worked. Most places have been really good, so it's been really important with making difficult decisions for people and dealing with and being aware of difficult circumstances, people to be able to have freedom to discuss with my work colleagues, the ins and outs about the plan. We actually kind of have coffee breaks like once a week with the team, and it's actually really useful to debrief about a case in terms of decision making, or even just acknowledging how awful that situation is or whatever. So it's really good to have someone who knows the complexities and has insight into the illnesses to be able to share that with. And then also there's friends and family and my discipler, my mentor at church, who it's helpful for debriefing and just everyday support, just hanging out and, clearing the head from work issues. But I think the most important thing, which I learned actually when I was only a few years out as a doctor, was actually to rely on God for strength and wisdom most. It was most useful to take things to God, difficult things to God first, because he actually understood the ins and outs of the complex issue that I was dealing with, whereas it's either confidential, as you know, you can't really explain to people or family exactly what's going on, or it's just like about chemo or radiation, like people don't understand how this is such an important decision, or how hard things are. So it's good to know that God understands those things. And one of my friends said when I first became a consultant, where the kind of buck stops with you, is that they reminded me that God is the ultimate consultant. So that was good. So I've just come to rely on God for strength and wisdom, for help in kind of making rational decisions, particularly sometimes have a quick prayer before I see a new patient or have a consultation with someone that I know that's going to be emotional or difficult. So just praying for the right words to help them, or just the right words, because sometimes bad news, especially if it's like not a good thing, I don't think there's any good ways, not many good ways. There's no good way to say some things, and you just have to say it, and you just pray that it comes out the right way. And I also like to be an encourager for my patients, their families, and also my colleagues. So I think being able to help people in that way also, I guess, helps me if I think I can help people in that way. And yeah, I need to rely on God for help with problem solving, and also avoiding worry, just to realize that there's so many things I can control and help with, but then there's so many things I can't, and I need to, and I can just trust to leave that with God.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. I love that your first support and strength was your team around you at work, which I think is very true. Sometimes I come home and try and debrief with Caleb, my husband, at home, and not quite the same thing when you can't explain all the medical things. I try to sometimes, but yeah, it's not the same as your colleagues and those who understand you as well. So that's That's really awesome. My last question is just, what do you learn and how do you grow in your relationship with Jesus through how demanding your role is?
Okay. When you say how demanding your role is, I think everyone has demanding roles. I mean, I think maybe in, any job or relationships, there's always going to be demanding expectations of us, which I guess we just have to realize, and I guess doing something that is seen to be, it is demanding, like intellectually and physically and emotionally and stuff, that you just realize much more quickly maybe how dependent you are on God for the strength to do those things when there's unknowns, and and give a lot of giving, both of time and thought and problem solving, plus being there emotionally and appropriately at different times. So it just has made having a challenging career has made me realize how dependent I am on God for everything, mental strength, problem solving, creativity when needed, patience, to remember to put my ego aside when I need to ask for help, or if I'm not certain about the best care, like be okay with sounding stupid by asking a question if I think, asking at colleagues a question, even if I look stupid, but if I think it's going to improve the possible care or outcome of the patient, it's worthwhile looking stupid, or hopefully you don't in the end, but anyway, but again, it's just good to remind, it's just amazing knowing that I'm not alone, and that God actually is in control, and that I can leave things with him to sort out that I have no way of sorting out, or beyond my limitations, beyond my abilities. I do remember, and it is good when we have with the team, we've done a complex plan or some innovative kind of method, or to try and get people through treatment, and then when things go smoothly and everyone's on board, it's really great. So I'm thankful for when that happens, and when it's hard to see people suffering, going back to that, I do remember that God also sees and understands the suffering of the patients and their families more than me, so I don't feel alone in that for those people, and I remember that sometimes I feel sorry for myself more than the patient, no, but sometimes that I just remember that Jesus even cares, even came to earth and saw sickness and illness and injustice, and experienced himself, and so he can understand even more than I can comprehend what patients are going through, and I just pray that my patients would be able to have that comfort as well. So probably it's mainly Psalms that I think is just my long time being a Christian, that I kind of gradually built up trust and faith that God is always there, and probably Psalm 121 is probably has been one of the really good ones, one of the many things that have been helpful when I felt tired or emotionally drained and I had to go and see another difficult patient or whatever, just to say, if I can say, the first two verses, Psalm 121.
Go for it.
Verse 1, I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. So I won't, the whole psalm's great, but I won't go through it.
You can read that later.
You can read that later.
Yeah. Oh, lovely. That was, yeah, that's really awesome to hear your perspective, I guess, on a different side. And I love you saying that, you know, that someone said to you that God is the ultimate consultant. I love that. To know that, yeah, I do believe that he is really in control, and that, yeah, it must be a very good comfort to you as someone who is a consultant. And people will probably all looking to you, yeah, that you can have that strength of hope in someone above you that is God. Thanks so much for sharing, Jackie. Now we are going to pop into our Q&A. You guys can keep sending questions in if you like, but so the panelists, Jackie and Ruth and Gail, my mum, feel free for any of you guys to just jump in and answer these questions. I think most of them are just generic to you guys. So the first question is, can one of you share with us, or you know, a few of you can share how the people, or maybe just someone specific, who listened and supported you best and was there for you? Who would like to start off answering this question? Sorry.
I think for myself, I think, you know, just at the stage we were at, and we were in Ballarat, smaller town, yeah, just the friends and neighbours around, that was a big help to us. I just found that very supportive as a family as a whole. For myself, I think my brothers and sisters we became a bit closer because we were all in it together and sharing that struggle together. So yeah, that was a big help. Just the family, the siblings themselves, and we were trying to all support each other. Yeah, I can't think of an exact one support that was more important than the other. I think just the collective support was, yeah, God put people there in all different aspects of our paths. That was, or my path, that was a big help to me.
Yeah. Thanks, Mum. Question for Jackie. Why and how did you decide to do oncology, Jackie?
All right. So I kind of fell into it. So I did medicine, and then I wasn't sure what specialty I wanted to do. So I did a few different things, and in the end, I'd actually had quite a bit of experience looking after cancer patients, and I had never really thought of doing radiation oncology as a specialty, and someone suggested it because I had so much experience with that and not being confronted by all the things that are required. So yeah, so someone suggested that would be a good fit for me, and so yeah, I applied for the program, and 5 years later have the certificate. Yeah. I did like this because there's lots of different types of, there's surgical oncology, medical oncology, which is the chemo and the drugs, the biologic agents and things. So mine is mainly treating using radiation treatment for cure or help with symptoms for cancer, which means, I guess, that there's a lot of, it's turned into a lot of computer work now. So there's a lot of computer planning, spatial visualization of anatomy. So a lot of techie stuff, which is good to break up the harder, the face-to-face, which is enjoyable, and I get a lot of satisfaction from, but it breaks up having that kind of those hard discussions all the time. So having planning time as well.
Yeah, would be helpful to break that up. Thanks, Jackie. Sharing time's gone a little bit longer than we anticipated, so I'll just do one last question. Perhaps Ruth, you can answer this question best. Do you have any suggestions for how to lessen the burden of communication to others, so that the patient and the close family members aren't too overwhelmed with online communications? Obviously, messages show love, and that's important, but yeah, just perhaps, yeah, what way you've experienced that helps communication.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Gabby? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Did you mean the patient and the relatives? Is that what you mean?
Yes. Yeah, I believe that's what the question's directing to.
Yeah. Okay. Sometimes you don't need to say it verbally. You just need to listen, because they have a lot of stories to tell you, you know, a lot of pain, a lot of frustrations. So you need to be there, although there's 101 things that you need to do for the patient. But the patient, you know, they lose control. They want to be in control of certain things, and they only want you to listen, because when you touch a patient, everything is painful, you know, for them just to touch them. But by listening and comforting them, and but not really like being what do you call it, being firm, and you know, even if you have a lot of things to do, you just need to take time and just listen. I think that comforts them. And also a good good support with the relatives would be also to listen and give them a straightforward explanation, not really sugarcoating it, but always to be realistic. So yeah.
Thanks so much, Ruth.
Welcome.
Thanks, everyone else. So now we're going to go into a time of just like, we'll go to what the Zoom calls breakout rooms. If anyone's experienced that before, you won't have to do anything. We will break you up just into smaller groups. So our host will pop up some questions for everybody and into the chat box. But if you have your own questions or things you would like to say or discuss in these groups, it's just I guess a time to be, have a chat about what some of the panelists have spoken about, and maybe some things you're going to talk about. So it's just there, the 1, 2, 3, 4 questions. You can read them, you can answer some of them, all of them, or you can go off into tangents as well, wherever the conversation leads you in your group. Just a nice time to maybe have a chat yourselves. So just in a moment, hopefully our host will be able to break us up, and it should just go automatically. I think we're just waiting for everyone to come back from the breakout rooms. Oh, I can't remember how many people were here, so I don't know if we're all back yet. 35.
Is the session going to end any time?
Yes, we're going to end soon. So I'll just, if Nat, did you want to do any wrap up or thank yous?
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to say on behalf of everyone here, a big thanks to our panel about your experiences and challenges with cancer. Gail, I love how you mentioned that God was your Heavenly Father who you could talk to when your dad passed away. Ruth, I was so encouraged by how you see suffering in light of God's sovereignty and glory. And Jackie, thanks for sharing about how you rely on God for strength and wisdom in making the best decisions for your patients at work. And yeah, I think that what you've shared today will be really helpful for us going forward in knowing how to care for people with cancer. And just want to say a big thank you to Gabby for being our wonderful MC today. So thanks, Gabby, and I'll hand it back to you now.
No worries, Nat. Yeah, new experience for me hosting on Zoom. It's a little bit harder being in the room. And also, I don't know if anyone else has been to another Blossom Australia's Business Morning Tea, but I'm missing all the cakes that are usually baked, particularly pandan cake. Anybody? It's always so good. Thanks everybody for joining us. Yeah, we'll be wrapping up now. I just like to, we'll pop up the slides, advertise some future events that are coming up. Here's our donation page as well, which will pop up and leave at the end for those of you to continue to donate. The first event is Saturday 25th of July, Living Single live webinar. A gospel focused about living a single life. And the other one is behavioural addiction, substance use and beyond. So that'll be a webinar held on 2nd of August to 2 p.m. Led by addiction medicine specialist, Dr. Alan. Well, I can't pronounce that in the last name. I'll try. Gisbers. Those are two. Keep an eye out on our Crossculture Facebook page, and I'm sure there'll be more information about those two. Also, just to mention, in the chat box will pop up a link to just a survey about the event. If you do have time, please fill that out to give us feedback. So that's just popped up in the chat box for everybody. And we've got the donation link there as well, QR code, and the website you can type in just there if you need to. Thank you everybody for joining us for our Australia's biggest morning tea. Just also want to thank Janet so much for all that she has done for us, and Janet, that you are in our thoughts and prayers with your upcoming surgery too. Thanks so much. Thanks everybody. We'll catch you next time.